There have been some amazing podcasts, lectures, and discussions in social media about depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. Well, one of you out there listening reached out to me and said that they had a very interesting story that they wanted to share. And after listening, I felt it would be great for everybody here to listen to an amazing story that affects all of us. So, as I tell you all the time, get in the car, buckle up, or get on the treadmill, or grab a drink. But today's podcast episode with Jeannie Moody is not one that you want to miss. Hey there, everybody. This is Dr. Glenn Krieger, and you're here for an amazing another episode of the Orthopreneurs Podcast. And today we have a special treat because someone reached out to me, and I started to hear her story, and I realized that she's absolutely an amazing, amazing person for us to all hear from. So please, let's all welcome Dr. Jeannie Moody. Hello, Jeannie.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. And I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for doing this, because I'm going to just, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to give people a little backstory about how this came to be. Is that okay?
Sure.
And feel free to jump in because it's your story more than it is mine. But not too long ago, what was it, about a month ago, where Kyle had Anil on his Digital Ortho Live? Was it like a month and a half ago?
Yeah, not long ago.
Yeah, it was that amazing episode. And if you folks out there haven't listened to it, Kyle Fagala and the Digital Orthodontist Live, he has some great guests. And he had on the amazing Anil Adikula, who's a great human being, a great leader, pioneer in our profession. And they were discussing some really heavy topics. You know, it wasn't just all fun and games. And they were talking about things like depression. And that's when you reached out to me, Jeannie, right?
Yes, when he was real courageous and shared on his divorce and depression and mental illness. And he hit on a lot of topics that I felt were near and dear to me. And I felt that I could contribute similarly in that arena. And so, I think the next day or pretty quickly after, I reached out to you.
Yeah. And I'm always open to listening to anybody's message because we can all learn from each other. And the more I heard your story and the more you told me about it, the more I felt like, hey, you know what? We are all, I mean, many of us may not ever go through depression, right? I mean, some people are wired to be Tigger, right? And
right.
Just bounce along in the world forever and ever. And God bless folks who are like that all the time. But we all can understand hurt and pain and vulnerability and all the sorts of things that you've explained to me that you've really experienced and learned from. And so before we get into that, as I ask everybody, let's go back a little bit and tell me a little bit about yourself, your life, your practice, about how you ended up where you are today. And then we can hop into the heavier stuff.
I was raised in a small town in Colorado outside of Steamboat Springs by my dad. So I had a single dad and grew up in a mountain town and just played a lot of sports and we raised a lot of hell out there. And my mother lived in Florida and I spent summers with her. And so I ended up at the University of Florida for college and dental school.
Nice.
And then got into University of Colorado for ortho residency. And I graduated in 2008 and actually moved up to the mid-cities near you, worked for a big multi-doctor practice for a year, and then found my way to Austin in 2010. And I worked for a big DSO as their head of orthodontics. And then in 2011, opened my own practice. And I have a satellite now as well.
Nice.
And that's how I ended up in South Austin. It was a little more like Colorado, a little more laid back than Dallas, as you know. So
yeah, just keep
I fit in a little more here.
Uh-huh.
But Dallas is great. But this has been home now for I guess 9 years, and I've been an orthodontist for 10 years.
Beautiful. And as anybody who's friends with you on Facebook would know, you also have a spectacularly gorgeous family. So,
thank you.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So tell us a little bit give us an intro here, or let's jump right into it, about your message and maybe some background, however you want to frame it, and we'll take it from there.
Well, for me, I was divorced. I filed for divorce in 2014, and then again in 2016. And my ex-husband, he was always ADHD, pretty severe ADHD, and he thought a lot differently than me. And we were a good match because of it, but it started to spiral and go into these episodes where it wasn't a partnership, and some manic behavior and some mental health issues started to surface that can come on in your mid 30s. And so it kind of went from ADHD to, this next level of something's not right. And tried to get help and reconciled, and ended up, getting pregnant with twins after I'd already had one child. So in 2016, I found myself with a 2-year old and two 6-month-old twins, and just more chaos than I've ever been in, in my life.
Wow.
I was running a practice, and I also was opening a satellite, finishing out a satellite. And I found myself just in the midst of too much chaos. And finally, I guess they say, mediocrity becomes change-worthy pain is something that we hear a lot. But in this instance, it became, you have two choices. You're going to stay in this or you're going to leave. That's the only thing you can control. And for me, I've always, out hustled the chaos, or outsmarted the chaos, or tried to control the chaos. And this time I couldn't do any of that. And so I decided to leave. And so I filed for divorce and took the kids, and you know, I guess the message was, the way I dealt with it was, and I later realized that this method, it served me at the time, but it may not be the best way. But I hustled.
Right.
I didn't curl up in a ball and cry or start drinking or any of that. I just hustled.
And by the way,
And
just as a quick aside,
yeah.
that's endemic to our profession, right?
Oh
That's
yes.
you just described the typical orthodontist, male and female, that they run into a wall. Most of us are going to hustle. We're going to figure out a way to get through that. We've done it our lives. We're going to work through it. And I guess we could almost say, like, there's no amount of hard work that that's too much for us to do to get through this problem. And
Oh
so,
right.
yeah, I mean,
Oh
you're
right.
typical orthodontist right there.
Right. And when I speak to other women, in Austin, they turn to drinking, or they turn to, going out with friends too much, or they curl up in a ball and don't go to work for a month. And the uniqueness of us is you're right. That's not us. And we put on our survival face, and we show up, every day, and we go. And we
And not
usually
that
do it with a smile on our face.
we do, but and not to be insensitive here, right? Just to think of everybody. I use that as a broader comment about us as orthodontists, but obviously there are many within our in our ranks who don't act that way, right? Who will, retreat a little bit, or who will turn to drinking. But I feel like as a group, orthodontists are typically type A's by nature, and are the types who are going to we can work our way through anything, right?
Right. And I also feel, sort of the message that I'd like to get across is the vulnerability in our profession amongst each other, but also as a leader and as a practice, owner, or just the doctor in a practice. If you're an associate, that is oftentimes, you know, you even colleagues that are vulnerable with each other, or vulnerable, with their families, are really reluctant to be vulnerable in their workplace. And so I think that that's something that we as a profession and just professionals struggle with as well. And that's I've learned a lot in this journey, and discovered so much. But the biggest thing that I discovered was how vulnerability can completely reshape you as a leader, and also just your workplace.
Yeah. So going back a bit, you found yourself in this really tough situation. The opportunity was there to either just walk away or keep going, and
Right.
and your first instinct would be, let's power through this. We got this. Let's go, right? And grab Thor's hammer and smash your way through
Yes.
everything. But what happened? What changed? Where did you go from there, and how did you get there?
Well, for me, my ex-husband had some mental health issues, and so it became apparent that this wasn't something I could do for him. I couldn't do the work or see the professionals that needed to be seen. And as much as I pushed and tried every way to get this person to see that this behavior was bizarre and frightening, there was nothing I could do to make that person accept it and do anything. So that's where it hit me in the face, and it wasn't a slow process. It was you need to go or you need to stay, but you have to do something right now. And so we left, and here I was in the middle of the summer living in vacation rentals 2 weeks at a time with 3 kids and my nanny toting along and opening a satellite office, and everything was hitting the proverbial fan in my life. But I was at the office every morning, with a smile, selling cases and doing what I needed to do to get through it. And once I got through that, I found I was still stressed and I was still overwhelmed, and I still was saying, I'm fine. Things will get better, when the satellite is open and when this
Yeah.
divorce is finalized and when I build a house. We were living in 1,000 square foot home at the time. And I finally realized that, there's never going to be a right time. When I hear so many people say, I need to exercise, I need to, no, you've got to, you will do it or you won't do it. And so I started to shift my mindset first to my physical health. And um, I realized I didn't fight this hard for this life. I needed to design my life. I needed to take steps to get to where I wanted to be in all the arenas, not just the office, which is where most of my attention went, was, keeping the kids alive and keeping the office going. But I had to stop and realize that, all these other areas needed attention, and the attention needed to be focused and clearly defined to get to what I wanted.
Right. And LD Pankey, I don't, he's not well known in the ortho world, but he's really
Yeah,
well.
he's a Pankey Dawson Institute.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
the general restorative world, Pankey Dawson, right, it was originally the Pankey Institute down in Florida. He wrote this great book. It's long out of print, I'm pretty sure. And I was lucky enough to have it lent to me by an older dentist years ago. And he talks about the cross of life, right? And you just sort of expressed it, which is that you need to be in the middle or as far out equally in both. He talks about love, work, worship, and play, right? Those are the four corners of the cross of life as he defines it. And if you find yourself too far into the work or too far into the love, I mean, I'll be honest, I met my wife in the second year of dental school, and I almost flunked out of dental school like the semester I met her because I was too far into the love. I mean, honestly,
Right?
I was so madly in love. I didn't want to go to clinic or do a
Yes.
wax up at 1 a.m., and so Vince Kokich, the late, great Vince Kokich, before he passed, I had a chance to see him in his office. And I said, what lessons do you have to teach me before I go out to ortho school? And he said, he summarized it by saying, just don't be like a paper, if you take a paper airplane, it flies well because it's well balanced. If the nose or the rear end or either wing gets out of balance, the paper airplane crashes. And it was his way of saying what you just said is, try to get your life in balance, because when we work too hard in one section, the other sections will inevitably fail. And it sounds like you sort of got that at a good age.
Yes, and we like to go towards things that we can see results, or sometimes the easiest thing, and sometimes that's work, or sometimes that's physical. We're going to hit the gym 5 days a week. Sometimes the hardest places are the places that need the most attention. And for me, hustle got me through a lot in my life, and stopping and breathing and focusing on what I couldn't see when I was in the midst of it was really hard and difficult. And so that hustle and that, and even working out and, focusing on the office, stopping and pausing and working on the emotional side of things, and the family and spiritual side of things, and my leadership, honestly, is what, what was hard and scary, just
Well,
stopping and
how did you
breathing.
do it? I mean, I mean, I know in retrospect, it seems like, well, I did it. I just had to do it. But how did you do it? How did you go from this, I'm going to power through everything, which I got to be honest is kind of my approach, and it's not a good approach. But where do you go from that and say, I need to step back at a time when everything's going badly for me, and I need to sort of just take a different approach? What did that mean? How did it manifest itself? Like, you would just physically stop and say, instead of me coming up with answers and solutions, I would suddenly just stop and sort of be with it. I'm curious to see what it meant to you.
It really, I'm just one of these people that I don't stop, and I'm fairly creative person and can come up with great solutions for other people, friends and family members. But I didn't pause and look at my own life. And it's funny, a side note of goal setting. And this year I switched my whole way I do that as well. But every year I set these goals and write it down and do this stuff, and it never happened. And it was sort of like that in my life. I was, you know, I want to go to the gym so many days, and I want to do this with the practice. And I felt like I was working towards these things, but the route I was taking, it wasn't necessarily addressing underlying issues or, what is reality. A lot of times we tell ourselves bullshit stories all the time. And if you'll stop, even in your day-to-day life, you can stop and tell yourself, well, what story am I telling myself? And there's stories you tell yourself all day, about I don't want to go into this because people are going to, judge me because I haven't, been an orthodontist for 20 years, or whatever the story is. We tell ourselves every day to pause and realize that you're telling yourself these stories and that half of them aren't true, and to kind of dissect it. That's really been a game changer for me. And also working back, you can go to the gym all you want, and you can, hire consultants and read books, and books are helpful. I read a lot of them, but until you dissect some of this stuff in your own life and try to realize, a little bit about why you're doing that. And for me, it was hustle. Hustle served me. Hustle worked. Hustle got me through dental school. It got me, into ortho school. It had worked in a lot of scenarios, but stopping hustling and even slowing the practice down a little bit, coming to my team and telling them, I'm sorry I wasn't a good leader. And I had this meeting, and I said to them, you're seeing outside changes. I'm working out a lot and trying to, do different things on the outside that you're seeing, but I'm also doing that on the inside. And I owe you an apology for trying to out hustle everything. And I thought that giving you a Christmas bonus or buying you Starbucks and writing up, manuals and procedures was enough to get you on my team and to be a leader. And really, you were all intimidated by me, and I stifled, your creativity, and I took part of your humanity out of the workplace. And that's something that I now know you have to embrace the whole person, and vulnerability doesn't mean you're walking around, crying in your Starbucks at the office, or pissed off because you had a bad night with the kids or whatever. But it means that there's a whole person there in your staff, and allowing them to be their whole selves and not to be intimidated or not to be fearful of coming to you with ideas. That's something I realized, and I apologize to them for. And I told them, what I'm telling you, this hustle has gotten me through. And I felt like if I stopped, I would crumple up in a ball on the floor, and nobody would have a job, nobody would get paid, and the kids wouldn't eat. But the reality is that that's not the case, and that's not serving me. And so I'm going to have a new way of leading and a new attitude around the office, which is vulnerability. And that's been huge for us.
So, there's a lot to digest there. And I'll be vulnerable with you, Jeannie.
Yeah.
My emotional IQ is like that of a 4-year-old. I always joke with my wife, I'm that guy at the dinner table where we're with that other couple. And, I don't realize that someone might have gotten divorced or something happened in someone's life. And I'll ask a simple question, right? You don't know better. But
Right.
then something will happen and my wife will kick me under the table and I'll like turn to her and go, what? And then she gives me the look, right? Because I
Right.
just, because we all have strengths and we don't have weaknesses. We have things we work on, right? So for me, emotional intuitiveness, not a maturity necessarily, but emotional intuitiveness is difficult for me. And so trying to
And
unpack, sorry, please.
it was for me too. I mean, I thought, hey, my accountant said you spent, $8,000 on Chick-fil-A and Starbucks for these girls. Is it working for you? And I said, no, and I thought, hey, I'm rewarding you, I'm buying you little treats, telling you, great job. That wasn't enough. But in my mind, I was a great boss. It never dawned on me that they don't want that. They want me to kind of discover their love languages, if you're familiar with that. But
Yeah.
some of them want me to talk about how are your children, how's your dog, how is your house coming along, these things that just felt a little foreign to me with my staff,
Yeah.
because same thing with my intuition with them was off, and I thought, here I am buying them stuff, and that's not my love language. So it's funny that that's how I expressed, my adoration for them, but it was completely off base of what they were craving and what would lead them to respect me and care about me, which is obviously what has helped me to become a better leader, because they do care about me and respect me more than they did when I ran things like that.
Yeah. It's such a broad topic and there's so much to unpack here. And, you talked about, we're all part of this big social media community out here. And we see the posts from people who say, you know, I make sure I take really good care of my team and we always go out to dinner and I buy them lunch all the time. And, oh, Dr. So and so is the greatest. He got a massage therapist in the office the other day. And I think it's easy for us to fall into the trap of, what may work for them and their particular team may not work for us as well. And at the end of the day, none of us is in those practices looking at the practice. And the team may go on social media and say how much they love their doctor. And I say that in air quotes with my fingers, but
Right.
when the real, as they say, when the fit hits the shan,
Yes.
are they going to be there for them? And that I always tell people, I don't have a million friends. I have a lot of acquaintances, but I have, the friends I have are friends who, they're there for me no matter what happens. And is our team there for us the same way? And are we there for our teams? Right? Because it goes both ways.
Right.
So buying them Chick-fil-A and Starbucks is no replacement for the deeper, meaningful relationship that you're talking about here. And
And that hits on, that is exactly right. And it hits on another thing of your tribe and finding, people. And at first I thought, well, some of these friends I have, it's more superficial, and I didn't have a large group of friends either, but I felt, okay, maybe this person, isn't as deep. And I passed these judgments and told myself these stories. And then I started having conversations with people where I was vulnerable. And the unique thing, or the thing that shocked me, was they were then vulnerable. And it put the relationship in a place of courage and openness to hearing criticisms or growing. And so I had conversations with people I went to residency with, and I was friends with them and we hung out and it was great. But all of a sudden, here 10 years later, I'm having these, hour-long conversations where I'm growing as a human, and they're growing, and we're talking about deep things like divorce or, you know, children or hardships. And these are male colleagues, some of them, and some of them are female, but it was surprising to me that being vulnerable often leads other people to be vulnerable. And so I took that to the friends I had that I had, passed judgment on, or said, okay, well, maybe this person's not deep enough for what I want in my life or where I want to invest time. And I started being vulnerable with them. And not all, but most of them, the same thing happened. The relationship went from, let's have lunch and chat about the kids, to something really meaningful and impactful in my life. And I feel like you have to be courageous enough to be vulnerable, and like Anil said, call me, call somebody, but get a tribe and find a tribe. And even in even in these groups, you see a lot of stuff on these Facebook groups, and some people are very vulnerable, and some people, I don't know, they put airs up. But I have people that text me, and they'll text and say, "Man, my satellite only had 25 patients today. What's going on? Did you have a down month?" Or it's just honest and vulnerable. And
Yeah.
it's so helpful because I think it's some book, I've read a lot of books, but one of these people says the most important thing that you can hear is me too. And so to feel like, man, I had a bad month, or was it a good idea to do this satellite, or man, these guys look like they're just crushing it. And here, it's super competitive, and it was a rough, April in Austin, or whatever the case may be. But to hear somebody else say, me too.
Yeah.
And even if it's not the exact same thing, but just to hear these struggles of their practice, sometimes that's more beneficial than these posts about, look at this cool trick, or look how I did this awesome marketing thing, or I'm crushing it with this new SEO campaign. That's great too. But I think there needs to be a little bit of balance, or we fall into that Facebook mindset of everybody's crushing it and everybody's family's wonderful, and
Yep.
and it's not really the case.
Yeah. I mean, if I spend enough time on Facebook, Jeannie, I am the worst husband. My children
Yeah.
are terrible. They can't do anything right. My house is terrible, and I don't travel enough. And my practice is is terrible. You spend enough
Yeah.
time, and the studies are crystal clear. They show that what you see in Facebook groups are not representative of reality, because people only show their best, which is case in point to your statement, is that people aren't saying, "Hey, by the way, you know, I was off the wagon for 3 years, and today I had another drink, and I feel miserable about
Mhm.
it." Right? Nobody
Yeah.
posts that, and they say I'm sober for 3 years, but nobody posts their failures. And I agree with you. I think it has to happen more often. And I remember there was a post once on one of the groups, and it was a question about growth, or some sort of mindset, and someone had posted, "Yeah, I had a really down month. I think I've only done 63 starts, or some ridiculous number like that." And someone else posted after that, like they posted, "Holy crap, I must have a crappy practice because I only did X." And I remember in my head, like this release of like, it's so good to see somebody else say that. And then I responded accordingly, right? The same way. And, we get tied up in believing this fallacy that, what we see online is what we should be. And I wrote about that years ago when I wrote about the purple suit syndrome, which I won't get into again here, but it's on my blog. And I think we have to run our race, as Leon Panici always says, right? Run our race and be comfortable with who we are. And your message is so good because, again, I get approached all the time privately in Facebook messages because I'm out there, right? I put myself out there. And I always say to people, if you need anything, reach out to me. And I think it takes a second to pause here and tell everybody listening, if you are struggling with anything in your life, if you are struggling with depression, if you are struggling with any challenges in your life that really get you to a point where you don't know where to turn, reach out to me on Facebook. You know how to get me. It's easy. I'm always there for you. But because of that, I always get these sorts of messages from people. And you would be, well, I don't think you'd be surprised, but I think people listening would be surprised at how many people are struggling day to day just with the basic coping in their practices, in their lives, and they don't have anybody to turn to. And I think
Yeah.
we as a community can be so much more sympathetic. And I'm pointing fingers at myself as well as everybody else out there. And I think we need to come together as a community and use our pulpit of 4,000 of us to not scream at somebody about the bracket they're using, or the motion appliance, or a claim they made, or what kind of ortho they provide, but to actually make people feel better about the fact that no matter where you are, it can always get better, and life can get better. And that we should.
Exactly. And I'm here too. You can reach out to me on Facebook. But that's the thing for me is when people reach out to me, I tell them this is my story. This is what, I've chosen as the path to the life that I want. Your definition of personal growth could be completely different than mine. A lot of the methods and ways to get there may be similar, but it's your life and your growth. And on that same note, being vulnerable leads other people to be vulnerable and share. And that's the same thing I experience. People that I don't know that say, "Hey, can I have a conversation with you?" Or I saw on Facebook, you're divorced, and this and that. But it's important to let stuff out in a safe place, but also to, find people that will check you and that will help you be vulnerable, but then what? Here you are vulnerable, but you got to then grow or take the steps. You
Right.
can't complain about something if you're not willing to put energy into changing it, and that's really where your energy needs to go. There's a good book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie, but it's an amazing message about that, about what can you control, what can you do, and then putting your energy towards that. And I think a lot of times we just get stuck complaining or comparing, and then we just find ourselves living this mediocre life, and it's fine, everything's fine, the practice is fine, the family's fine. It's not fine. And then at what point do you admit that it's not fine, and then go about making changes? And a lot of times that changes in yourself, and that's hard. So if we can be there for each other and be a little more vulnerable, and other people see, oh man, this person is struggling with, their practice or their family, or, you know, drinking, 3 glasses of wine every night, and thinking that that's self-care or whatever it may be, I think that others can come forward and work through it, because I think we're very quiet in our profession about what's behind the scenes, and I think we all strive for excellence. A lot of us do, and that's part of our personality. And so with that, I think there's a weakness that we think is associated with vulnerability, and I think we should, shatter that.
I agree. I'm as guilty of it, and I don't want to use the word guilty because it makes it sound like it's a bad thing, right? And that you should
Right.
of it, which you shouldn't. But I've perpetrated that enough in my life. Just recently, we had a discussion in our private R&D group about growth and what have you, and I was like, look, you can always grow, you can always get bigger, you can always have more. You can always have more balance in your life. And then I'm going to give a rare Tim Finelli shout out here because this is all a vulnerability. I need to apologize to Tim because he was right. He made a comment which until now I really didn't buy into, which was like, but what if we're happy where we are, right? And
Hmm.
it's like it takes such incredible emotional intelligence and wherewithal to say, you know what, I can have more, I can run faster, I can lift more weight, I can have a bigger practice, I can push my kids harder, whatever it may be. But it comes a point to where maybe it's important for us to recognize that not everybody wants what we want. And that,
Well,
and
the other question is what then? Then what?
right,
Is it, well, my kids will get a scholarship, and I'll retire earlier. Well, that might be worth it. But some of the things, then what? What's going to happen then? Are
right.
you going to be satisfied? Are you chasing something that is, yeah, I mean, for us, it's something that is oftentimes we can physically chase it and we can go after it. We know how to try to increase starts, and it's the easy thing. But I think we don't do enough reflection and digging into why we feel like that's going to equate to happiness or satisfaction or peace. And then we just get on that treadmill and it never really goes anywhere.
I agree. Perfectly stated. And and when I was talking to Tim about it, the only argument I made back, which I think there's some validity to, is it's okay to want more as long as that ever expanding circle reaches all four corners of your life.
Yes.
Hey, I want to be better at work. Well, you know what? I'm going to be better at love. I'm going to be better at worship. I'm going to be better at play. And I'm going to expand myself in all four directions. But that being said, not many people I know are really good at expanding their life in every direction at the same time. And I think it's okay to be out of balance for short periods of time while you work on. You're opening a new practice. You're going to be focused on work for a while, right? I mean, there's no way around that. You have a new baby. I mean, you're going to be focused on family for a while. But while you're in that corner of your life, I don't think you can ignore the rest of what's out there. So I just want to go back to something real quickly because you talked about your vulnerability with your team. We talked about teams where the doctor buys Starbucks and what have you. But Jim Stork, one of my favorite people in the world, amazing human being. Great. Have you ever met Jim?
I don't think I have.
Yeah, he's in Des Moines. Sorry, Jim. Don't mean to embarrass you here, but anybody who's ever met him will tell you to a person, he's just the greatest guy you'll ever meet. Great clinician, great leader. I've been in his practice. And when I visit practices, I watch the doctor, but I often sit down with the team and say, what makes your practice special? And his team would run through a brick wall for him. They love him, truly love. I don't mean they like working there. They love him. They love him. When I asked why, they said because he really cares about us, right? And the things he does with emotional intelligence in his practice is incredible. And I learned from him about the love languages, right? And I mean,
Yeah.
he goes through the Dave Ramsey financial stability course with his team so that everybody has financial stability and understands how to budget and doesn't have that crazy merry-go-round of finances in their lives like we all see in our teams. He really genuinely wants to leave their lives way better when they leave him than they were when they came in. And so I did the love languages thanks to Jim. I did it with my team, and I found out that my team doesn't want Starbucks. And I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but
Right.
what's really important to my TC, and I didn't know this, and it brought her to tears when she was talking about it. She said, "All I want from you is time with you. All I want is I want to sit and talk to you about the issues in the office. And I just want you to sit and stop moving for 5 minutes and give me your undivided attention and be with me at a table listening."
Yes.
And A, I am blessed to have an employee who's willing to tell me that, right? And B, I'm thrilled that she did because now, once a week, I make sure no matter what else is going on, we sit down at a table and she gets 45 minutes to an hour of my time during lunch where we sit and anything that's on her mind, she gets my undivided attention. And you can see it charge her batteries. Like you can see that when it's all done, there's a spring in her step, but not because I gave her something, but I gave
Hmm.
her my time. And I think it's important to like double down on that. Exactly what you're saying is, get to know what your team wants, get to know what the team needs, and be willing to be vulnerable enough to give it. Right? Because I could easily have said, "What are you talking about? I give you my time. I do what I can. If it's not good enough for you, there's the door." And I think your message is a really good one from that point. So, what should we be doing? What's the first step? Do we look in the mirror and realize? Do we sit down with our team and poll them? What would you suggest to anybody out there right now who says, this vulnerability thing resonates with me? I want to get started in it. Where do I go? What should they do?
I think for me, looking at sort of those areas of your life, physical, marital, parental, financial, the practice, vocational type of, domains or realms, looking at each one and evaluating where you are. Now I do the full focus planner, but Michael Hyatt has something online where it's a little test and it gives you a score and it's free, but it tells you where you are in each of those arenas. And you might be shocked to find, man, I'm kicking butt in the vocational practice financial, but my relationships with my kids or my spouse are lacking. But look at those and try to see where you are in each of those arenas. And then ask yourself, what would you like to see different? And what can you see that change in 30 days, in a quarter? I see so many people with these really vague goals or these vague things that they want. And I feel like one of the things I've learned is be very specific and have a timeline. And then what are you going to do? And why do you want that? What are your motivating factors to lose 10 pounds or have a better relationship with your teenager? So spend some time with yourself. And then, yes, I think as far as your vocational or your practice relationships, for me, stopping and giving up what I'd been doing for so long was hard. And coming in like a new person, not I'm the boss, I'm strong, this is what we're going to do, but coming into this vulnerable place. And I used to ask them, what are their yearly goals? What are your goals at home? How are things going? But I never. That was sort of it in January, our big team meeting. And now it's, hey, you had a goal to, stop drinking coffee. How's that going? What are you doing instead? How was your week with that? So now we try to talk about stuff that has to do with the practice, but also has to do with them in their life. How's your child? He was trying to make the varsity team. How'd that go? What happened with that? And checking in with each other on all aspects rather than just the practice. But I think introspection, sitting down with yourself and looking at those areas that you talked about, whether it be 4 or 8, but yeah, your family and your spirituality and all of these things. And then thinking about what you want to see different, in a month and in a year, and then working back for actionable steps and a timeline on those actionable steps, because it's not always, the thing that you want to do is sit down and journal or, I get up at 5:30 in the morning and do this thing called Savers, which is like the Miracle Morning, which is another book that a lot of people have read. But, you meditate and you exercise and you do all this stuff. And man, there's not time for it. And I don't want to get up and do it, but I do it because it makes sure there's time dedicated to growing and achieving what I want instead of just, oh man, it's almost the end of the quarter and I haven't done anything to reduce my social media screen time or whatever my goal may be for the quarter. So I think defining it, being specific about it, and then setting the time aside of when you're going to do it, when you're going to start, and sticking to it.
And you mentioned The Miracle Morning. Who's the author of that?
That's Hal Elrod, I believe.
Okay.
And that's a great book. Hal Elrod is the author of it, and that was probably one of the first books I read that started. It's an immediate, easy read, and it's something that you can start doing the next day. And it's the big idea is savers. So every morning you spend 10 minutes or an hour or however much you want to dedicate, but you do silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. And so those are the savers is the acronym. But, some days my scribing is 3 sentences, and sometimes you read 5 pages in a book that you're trying to get through. And sometimes my affirmations are on the way to work and I look funny driving down the road, telling myself these things, but getting these things in the morning and before you start your day, but scheduling time to do it is a game changer.
Nice. Affirmations, just as a quick aside, they make you feel like you're insane the first time you
Oh
do them.
yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I still am a huge fan of affirmations. Um, and it's funny because you ready, Jeannie? Nobody else is listening except you and me right now. So I'm just gonna,
Okay,
I'm gonna
perfect.
tell,
They
I'm
have
gonna
all
tell you,
tuned out.
I don't want
Okay.
anybody to hear this. So turn your volume down because I'm just speaking to Jeannie now. But I was so scared of sales when I was a general dentist. When I first bought my practice, I was scared to death of coming across as a salesman to my patients. And I was afraid of sales. And I remembered that one day after that stupid, you remember the Saturday Night Live, Stuart Smalley, I'm good enough,
Yep.
smart enough,
Yes.
by golly, people like me,
Yes.
which is a great affirmation for the record.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not making fun of it, but I am. I used to remember I would drive, there was a long hill up the road to my office in Seattle, in West Seattle. And every morning, as I would drive up this last little hill, trying to avoid children while I was driving through a school zone, I would say to myself at least 5 or 10 times, I'm not afraid to present the best care for my patients. I would say that over and over again because I'd have a patient in the chair who said they didn't have any money, they were out of work, their family didn't have anything in the bank, and yet here I saw, 15 teeth breaking down that needed crowns, and I needed to talk to them about $20,000 in treatment, but I listened to their story and I wouldn't do it. And I'd start this positive affirmation every morning. I'm not going to be afraid to present care to patients that's in their best interest. That was it. I say it over and over again. And you know what? I'd sit down across some patients and that voice would say it again to me. And I have no problem saying the best treatment they needed and let them make a decision. So positive affirmations are golden. And now that people are hopefully listening again, they turn their volume back up. It's not something to be undervalued. It's huge. And so one last question for you related to everything you just said, because there's a lot. Have you had anybody try to take advantage of your vulnerabilities?
Not that I can, not a specific example, but for me, the thing I guess is, you're in this relationship and it goes south, and you try the dating scene, and it's very tough when you're 40. But continuing to um, be vulnerable and to seek authenticity can be hard in that arena because so many people are not,
Right.
seeking that and are not necessarily what they say or after what they say they are. And so, for me, one of my affirmations, I'm expanding in success and love every day as I inspire others to do the same. And so it has nothing to do with what the world gives back to me. It's what I'm doing. I'm expanding. I'm becoming a bigger, better version of myself. And I'm hoping to inspire others.
It's awesome.
So just staying focused on you and what you can control and what you want, regardless of what the world gives you or what, I have staff members that I sometimes take advantage. Um, and also just, I'm not afraid anymore. I was afraid of, what are my oral surgeons going to think and my colleagues, and I'm going to these dental galas and now I'm single, and my ex-husband was a part of the practice, and they knew him, and losing that mindset that, everybody's perfect and everybody's living this perfect life, and here I am, divorced mother of three and two practices, and shifting my mindset to look at me, look, I'm a badass, like look what I'm doing, and look how I'm growing and changing, and not necessarily letting my ego take over, but just reminding myself that I'm doing extraordinary things. People aren't getting up at 5:30 in the morning to do these savers, and people aren't finding time to have three young kids and spend one-on-one time with each one and try to reduce my screen time. So just the fact that I'm making an effort in these arenas, it makes you extraordinary, because so many people settle for mediocrity and they stay there and they just don't go forward.
Yeah.
And so I think staying focused on that more so than what other people are doing or what other people may or may not take advantage of. I think staying on your journey. And like I said, I just want to be a better version of myself every day, and just putting the time and the effort into it and doing the work that's hard, and the things that you don't want to do, sometimes doing them first. It slowly makes a big difference in your mindset and in everything, from your practice to your relationships. But it's definitely thriving rather than surviving, which is where I was, a few years ago.
I love it. And I tell my kids every day, you got to do what you have to do before you do what you want to do.
Yes.
And they're learning that. And so it's interesting because what you touched upon, there was this old study years ago. Not a study. They interviewed a bunch of hospice care workers and said, what are some of the common themes you hear about people at the end of their lives when they know there's no time left, and they're sitting with you and they say, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that. And some of the common themes you hear them say is, you said, you're divorced and now you're going to this gala, and what are people going to think? And so I've sort of gotten way past like caring what anybody thinks anymore, but it took me a long time.
Right.
But they had said, one of the things was, I wish I cared less about what other people think. Right. And they also said things like, I wish I'd stood up for my own, I wish I'd had my own life. Like that was one of them.
Yes.
Like, I wish I'd lived my own life. Like the common theme in these people is, I did so many things to make other people happy, not thinking about what made me happy. And if I could do it all over again, now that I'm looking at the window into the next realm, whatever that is, whatever you believe in, they looked at it and said, I only wish I had done me more and not been ashamed of what me would be doing. And I think that's your message is, you know what? Do what's right, grow every day, and don't care what other people think about it. Because if they accept you for who you are, amazing. And if they don't, that's not your problem. That's their problem.
Exactly.
And I love your message because it's all about positivity. And so thank you for that. So now, if you listen to the podcast, you know that there are 10 questions I ask at the end of every guest. And they're not my questions. I borrowed them from the great James Lipton, who does Inside the Actors Studio, and he borrowed them from Bernard Pivot. So here you go. Are you ready, Jeannie? There are 10 questions.
Okay.
And I know this is going to be great. I know it's going to be the best ever. Ready?
Yes.
So whatever's on your mind, just answer away. And there's no judgment. So
okay. Yeah. Turn your volumes down again.
No, turn them up. Go to 11 on your amp. So what's your favorite word?
Courage.
What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
A live performance of either a music or a play.
What turns you off?
Something that lacks action, complaining, or just something that lacks action behind it, or a specific what's the next plan, next step.
What sound or noise do you love?
I mean, everyone loves the money counting machine at the bank, but usually I'm taking money out to go pay for something. So
you like the sound of money coming out of a machine?
Yeah, that little thing, that thing.
The money counter.
Yeah.
I got no problem with that. That's a great answer.
I just had to go get a big old pile of money out to pay for something. They told me they wouldn't take taxes if I paid cash for my doors. So
I got
I
an
went
idea
up
for
there.
you. What I
Yeah.
want you to do is go to one bank, or better, go to the same bank. Just destroy the teller. Take out, ask her you need 1,000 singles. Write a check for
Yeah.
$1,000, and then give them back to her and say you'd like to change it to hundreds.
Yeah. Just sit there and listen. I should
It
buy
just,
one of those machines on Amazon.
yeah, yeah. It won't look too suspicious when people come into your house and see you with a money counting machine on the counter.
Yeah.
I'm,
Right.
I'm moving on to the next question because this could get us in trouble. What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh man, my kids grinding their teeth at night.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, gotta get that airway under control
Gotta
on
get
that.
that airway. Yeah, you never
Yeah,
know.
just made an
Don't, don't,
Essex for a 5-year-old. That's helping.
don't want them wetting the bed. Um,
Exactly.
what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a life coach or a painter.
A life coach or a painter? I like that. Well, I think you already are a bit of a life coach. Um, your painting, I can't attest to. What profession would you not like to do?
I would not like to, man, I don't know. Maybe, and all I can think of is, yeah, I've got this. The other day, my son got bit right on his testicle by a spider. So we went to the ER, and that poor ultrasound tech had to go to
I'm
town on
really
this
trying not
poor
to laugh.
kid.
I'm
Yeah,
trying not to
and it
laugh.
was like an hour long, and I was sitting there going, "Man, I didn't get this much ultrasound for my twins," and it all turned out to be fine. But this lady just she looked like that was the worst job on earth.
I
But
got, I got to be honest. That doesn't sound like a good job at that moment.
no, that's what I was thinking. Proctologist or a urology ultrasound technician, probably things I would pass on.
The weirdest part is that people look at us and like, do you ever get like, how do you look in people's mouths all day?
Oh
Right?
yeah.
I get that all the time. I'm like, it's no problem for me. And I'm assuming like for a proctologist, like the first couple of times you do it, it's kind of like, this sucks. And then after that, it's like, yeah, I got a
It's
sandwich.
interesting.
Got a sandwich in one hand,
Yeah.
and I guess it's just like desensitization. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Looking
Last
at your slides on the computer.
final question: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I would like him to say,
Or her?
or her, yeah, exactly. Man, you lived every day hard and like it was your last, and you loved out loud. You held nothing back, and good or bad, it was a big life and a vulnerable life and a courageous life.
I love it.
And I'm proud of you.
I love it. That's awesome. I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for being here, for reaching out to me after you heard Anil and Kyle, because I think your message is heard way too infrequently in ortho, and I think it's going to be my mission over the coming whatever to try to spread that gospel as best I can and to try to live that better because I need it. And on behalf of everybody out there, I just want to say thank you, Jeannie. Really.
Yeah, thank you. And again, reach out to me, reach out to Glenn if you don't have a tribe or don't have people that can relate to you as a professional. For sure. I feel like I gain a lot more than other people gain sometimes from these conversations.
Yeah. And the truth out there is, nobody needs to be alone today. We're all out there for them at all times. And it sounds like we're just paying just some quick little sort of comment out there, but I know that we mean it. And you're never alone. You can always reach out to us. We're always there for you. And so look for her everywhere, but more importantly, look for her probably at Orthopreneurs 2020 because
For sure.
you're definitely the kind of person I want up there speaking to our group. So thank you so much. And to everybody out there, if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me directly at doc@kriegersmiles.com, KRIEGER. And if you want to hit me up on Facebook, message me anytime. I'm always there for you. And until next time, just wishing you all a great day. And you know what? Between now and next time, focus on vulnerability because as Jeannie showed us, it could mean the difference in your life. So take care and we'll chat soon. We've got several stressors in our life. We've got a great profession, but we've got to deal with overhead. We've got to deal with productivity. We got to deal with team members that are outside of our control sometimes. And the great news is, all of these issues are addressed in depth in this year's curriculum at Orthopreneur Summit. So please go to opsummit2023.com, sign up for the meeting that's almost sold out, that everybody's going to be talking about, that you really need to be at to be your best practice with the lowest stress and highest profitability. opsummit2023.com. Please join me there so that I can take care of you even better than you take care of your patients.